high-frequency vocabulary in a text. Tom Cobb, based in Canada, updated it and made it HTML compatible, which means that you can do everything inside of a web browser without downloading software. And that version of Range is called Vocab Profile. And the new general service list is now up on Vocab Profile. And what that allows you to do is you just click on the link and you click on Vocab Profile and you click on New General Service List, New Academic Word List. And what that allows you to do is take any text and analyze what kind of coverage. You know, we're talking about 90% coverage, 95% coverage, and so on. If you want to analyze whether or not you know, a text is suitable for your students, Vocab Profile is a good analytical tool for that. So what I've done here is I've copied and pasted the first chapter of Harry Potter. And I think chapter 1 is called The Boy Who Lived. So this is chapter 1, The Boy Who Lived. I copied and pasted it into Vocab Profile. And what you see here is it's color-coded. All of the first 1,000 words now appear in blue, so you can very easily see where the first 1,000 words are. That's about 85% coverage for Harry Potter by the new general service list, with, and those are the blue words. The second 1,000 NGSL takes you up to about 90%. Those are in green. All the green words are 1,000 to 2,000 word level. The pink ones are 2,000 to 2,800. And that gets you to about 93% coverage, and then the red words are the off-list words. So, and it gives you the ability to double-click and ignore proper nouns. And what I've done is I've just removed a couple of Harry and Potter and Dudley and Dursley. I just clicked on 3 or 4, and that brought the coverage up to about 93%. I think if we click on all of them, you get closer to 95 or 96%. So basically what this shows is that the NGSL is giving pretty good coverage for unsimplified texts. But that's one tool. But there's another tool that's a different version of Vocab Profile that was developed by Rob Waring and myself for the needs of teachers. So Vocab Profile is more of an analytical tool developed for the needs of researchers. But we wanted to create a similar idea to this, but making something that would help teachers and authors to simplify text downward to the level. So if you know what your student's level is, how do we make, you know, a version of this that helps you to simplify down to that level? And that's called the graded text editor, the online graded text editor. And it's basically just the same thing as Vocab Profile, that's a little bit more user-friendly for teachers. And this also has the new general service list and new academic word list on it. So this is another free tool that you can use. Lawrence Anthony, a very well-known corpus linguist at Waseda University, has developed a whole suite of free corpus tools. One of the better-known one is called And Word Profiler, and on that free tool you can also use the new general service list. So this is if you prefer using And Word Profiler, it's available there as well. Tim Stoffel and Phil Bennett, who are at Miyazaki University, also based in Japan, have taken the new general service list and made a test called the new general service list test, and that's also downloadable from our website. So if you want to find out what level, what band of words your students should be studying, you can download this test. It looks, and there's a test in the mark sheet. Right now it's just paper-based, but we're working together to try and create an online version as well, so hopefully that will be up. I've also put together a small iPhone app. It's a free iPhone app called NGSL Builder. So this is a flashcard. It's like time interval spaced repetition flashcards for the new general service list. And the idea was to, so for your students who have iPhones, there's a free app there for them to learn the new general service list. There's another one for the new academic word list called NAWL Builder. And I've also built, if you prefer the old lists, the original GSL and the original Abercoxhead and AWL, we have GSL Builder and AWL Builder as well. So there's 4 apps. They're just simple flashcard apps, but can't beat the price, right? And this is what it looks like, spaced repetition. It just sort of keeps track and lets your students know. Okay, so this is a bit about, and you can see it on Wikipedia. And if any of you do use Facebook, we have an NGSL Facebook page. We're trying to use social media. As you can see, Almost all the resources are free ones, and we believe that this is a very important list for students around the world. So we're trying to spread the word through social media. So if you like it, please like it. Now maybe some of your friends will find out about it that way. So the idea is to just spread the word. So what I'd like to do now is sort of shift and talk a little bit about extensive reading now. And so there's the contrast between extensive reading and intensive reading that we often talk about, and each has its strengths and weaknesses, and probably we should be doing both, right? We should be doing both in our classroom. But basically with intensive reading, we're focusing on the development of specific reading skills and strategies, and that's as opposed to extensive reading, where we're really trying to focus on reading for pleasure, right? And to get them to either read for pleasure or read for information. One of the things that happens with intensive reading is usually the teacher is selecting a book or a text for the whole class. What we hope to have in sort of a pure ER approach is that students would be choosing their own materials, stuff that's interesting to them or stuff that they like. What we do in intensive reading is there's a very close, intense examination of the text and trying to work towards maximum comprehension. Whereas what we're doing in extensive reading is reading for general comprehension of main ideas, or reading for gist, trying to read quickly, reading for fluency, right? These are just a couple of the distinctions. If we look at, if we go back to the cafeteria after this presentation and you walk around, you're going to see a lot of textbooks, a lot of reading textbooks. Most of the reading textbooks look something like this. They focus on intensive reading, and what they'll do is they try to make these intensive readings a little bit more palatable by using short texts. So the text length is not too long. They usually add pictures or some kind of visual support to make the text more comprehensible. There's usually a couple of difficult words here and there, but they try to gloss those words down here to make them more easy. And then what they'll have is they'll have a couple of exercises to increase comprehension of the text. That's sort of what you'll see by, like Cambridge and Oxford and Pearson and all the other publishers out there for the typical EFL text. But what we see in Japanese high school texts for intensive reading doesn't look like this. Looks like that. This is New Crown. That's one of the #1 selling high school textbooks in Japan. And so what we see is the texts are much, much longer. There's hardly any visual support. The number of difficult words is through the roof. Many, many more difficult words. There's less definitions, there's less exercises, and there's more translation. And this is really a big problem, I think. One of the core problems that we have in Japan. So one of the reasons, I think there's several reasons why I think extensive reading is so important in Japan and why it's so useful in Japan. One of the problems here in Japan is that students are not practicing and learning how to read, they're practicing and learning how to translate. I mean, I'm a teacher trainer, that's what I do at my university, and so I observe junior and senior high schools all the time. And when I go, I'm really always sad when I go to observe a reading classroom, I go to observe a reading high school classroom, because 9 times out of 10, they're not reading, they're translating. And the teacher is droning on in Japanese and explaining grammar, and if they're lucky, they get through 2 or 3 sentences in a 50-minute class. And, might get through 2 or 3 sentences, but almost everybody's sleeping. So it's not like they even caught those 3 sentences. So they're not learning how to read, they're learning how to translate. In Japanese high schools, there's still, after all these years and all these decades, there's still way too much grammar translation as a teaching technique. There's no reason to be doing grammar translation, but it's still one of the predominant techniques in Japanese high school. There's way too much of an emphasis on accuracy and error correction. If a student makes a mistake, the teacher stops them and corrects them right there because they don't want them to learn anything bad. So there's overemphasis on accuracy and error correction. There's this overemphasis on intensive reading. And the materials that students are working with are just way, way above their level. And so the result, over the period of 6 years that students are studying junior and senior high school level anyway, but especially in high school, what we see is students' confidence in English, about their own English ability, their positive attitude towards English, their motivation to study English, every one of them is just sort of knocked out of them. Because they're working with texts that are so difficult. They're just translating them. They're doing error correction all the time. And I think every one of these points, every single one of these points, extensive reading is like a magic cure because it doesn't do any of those things. It almost does the opposite of that. And this, just to give you, just to sort of show you, I don't know if you've seen these slides before, but I did some research on Japanese high school textbooks back in the 90s. And what you would expect to see is that 80 to 85% coverage, if you do the first 2,000 words of English, if you do the first 2,000 general services, the old GSL, back in 2000, that's all we had. And we would expect 80 to 85%. If you do a graded reader, you're right at the right level, 99, 98% read for pleasure. If you try and read like Yomiuri Shimbun or Harry Potter, you're up in the 80s and 90s. Time magazine, a little bit more difficult, about 80%. Japanese high school textbook, harder than Harry Potter, harder than Time magazine, harder than a Yomiuri newspaper. Back in the 90s, these were the top 3 selling high school textbooks. We would hope to see somewhere between 80 and 85% coverage. Spectrum, only 71. Milestone, 78. The easy one, Unicorn, 79%. None of them were as easy as reading unsimplified native speaker text. Now think about that. Think about that for a second. We're talking about high school students who just have a couple of years studying English as a second language in an EFL setting where they're not getting English outside of the classroom, and we're forcing them to go through texts that are harder than Time magazine. That would have an effect on your motivation and confidence, wouldn't it? Right? So this is a real problem, and of course, the reason for that problem is the backwash effect. Keita Kikuchi, one of my graduate students, did a study in 2006, and we did another study in 2008, and we looked at the difficulty of entrance exams. And what we found is that there's this terrible backwash effect. If you look at the average difficulty of the reading passages, the English reading passages on entrance exams, they're all below 80%. And so what you see is the high school texts are teaching to the entrance exams. And that's where a lot of this comes from. So this is the vicious cycle, right? So they don't understand the texts, so they read more slowly, they don't enjoy reading, and they don't read much. And it's this horrible negative spiral that goes on for years and years and years until they finally give up. Whereas with extensive reading, you know the drill. It's wonderful because they read and it's at their level, so they can read, and because they can read, their motivation goes up and their confidence goes up, and they read more, and they get more vocabulary, more grammar, and that's how it should be. That's normal, right? This is normal. What we've got is not normal, and that's a big problem. Bill Brabe has a great quote back in Bamford and Day's book. Given the overwhelming evidence for the importance of extensive reading in learning a second language, why isn't everybody doing it? I mean, why aren't we? And the good news is that a growing number of people are doing it, that we are doing it. And I think the people in this room are some of the long-term advocates for extensive reading in Japan, and I think we have made inroads. And there are high schools that are doing fantastic things because they're doing extensive reading. So this is all very good. So where are we? What does that mean? I think what I want to talk about is come back to vocabulary for a moment. What we need, I really do strongly believe that we need students to intentionally study and to master these core, foundational, high-frequency words. It's absolutely essential if we want them to get to the level of independence, if we want them to be able to read without a dictionary and without our help and to interact with those texts. They absolutely need to do that. Spaced repetition flashcards, I didn't talk about that in detail today, but flashcards are a fantastic way to learn words quickly, to learn something about words quickly. They're very, very quick. You can master a lot of knowledge very quickly, especially if it's spaced repetition. This is a very good point about flashcards. The bad point about flashcards, as many of you might know, is they lack context. You can learn word on one side, definition on the other, but what about collocational knowledge? What about, what about the context, the multiple occurrences, and seeing the word in different contexts? It's very hard to do with flashcards, but that doesn't mean you throw out the baby with the bathwater. I mean, flashcards do have some very